Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. Now, listen. If you've spent literally any time looking into health, fitness, or biohacking recently, you've almost certainly been bombarded by the massive social media hype around a specific compound called BPC-157. I mean, people are claiming it works for absolutely everything, from shredding muscles to instantly healing torn tendons. But as focused learners, we don't just accept the hype, right? We look at the actual data. So, over the next 10 minutes, we are going to conduct a sort of medical detective investigation into BPC-157. We're going to break down exactly what it is, how it supposedly works, and what the actual evidence says. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the peptide popularity hype and then clearly define what peptides exactly are. From there, we'll compare lab results to human reality, navigate regulations in black markets, uncover those hidden dangers, and finally, look at proven healing alternatives. Let's start with Section 1, the peptide popularity hype. To truly understand this stuff, we really need to look at the environment that created it. See, over the last 5 to 10 years, the peptide market has absolutely exploded, largely driven by biohacking and wellness centers. The history of BPC-157 is actually pretty fascinating because it didn't just appear in a TikTok influencer's gym bag. It started as legitimate medical research back in the early 1990s in Croatia. Researchers were specifically looking into it for inflammatory bowel diseases and ulcer care. They wanted to understand how the body manages to heal tissue in the highly corrosive, acidic environment of the gut. But fast forward to the 2010s, and it gets completely co-opted by the biohacking crowds. And today, it is spread like wildfire on social media, touted as a miracle cure for joint repair and getting shredded. But before we get totally lost in those modern claims, we need to understand the basic biology. Moving on to Section 2. What exactly are peptides? Let's put on our medical detective hats here. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how simple the biological definition actually is. A peptide is just a small piece of a protein. Think of it like a short sequence of amino acids that are coded by your DNA. And I want to be super clear about this. Peptides themselves are not inherently bad or fake. There are probably 7,000 or 8,000 different peptides out there in biology. Many are completely recognized and proven for everyday health, stuff you've definitely heard of, like insulin, glucagon, or those collagen peptides everyone uses for skin health. They are quite literally the fundamental building blocks of life. So where exactly does BPC-157 fit into that whole picture? Well, BPC stands for Body Protective Compound. It's a specific 15 amino acid segment that is naturally found in human stomach acid. Just think about that for a second. The human stomach is an incredibly hostile environment, right? It's filled with digestive acids that can break down a solid steak. But our bodies are incredibly smart. The original, natural purpose of this highly resilient peptide is simply to protect our delicate intestinal lining from the harsh, highly acidic conditions of our own stomachs. That is its biological home base. It's essentially a gut protector. Which brings us to Section 3, lab results versus human reality. Because if it's meant to protect our stomachs from acid, why on earth are people loading it into syringes and injecting it into their shoulders and knees? This is where we have to step into the evidence room. We have to separate what happens in a petri dish from what actually happens in a living human being. Social media is utterly full of claims about overnight miracle recovery and healed tendons. And look, to be perfectly fair to BPC-157, in vitro, meaning outside the body, in a lab setting, it does do some phenomenal things. It significantly reduces inflammation and contributes to angiogenesis, which is the creation of brand new blood vessels. Your body absolutely needs those to deliver nutrients and heal an injury. But here is the massive catch. That fascinating data comes purely from isolated tissue cultures and rats. As the source material bluntly points out, unless you're a rat, you probably can't extrapolate this data to yourself. And that brings us to this incredibly important number in the medical world: 0. There are exactly 0 well done, large-scale human clinical trials showing efficacy. Let me say that again. There are 0 trials proving that injectable BPC-157 works or that it does anything beneficial for human muscle or tendon repair in the real world. In fact, the human data we do have is stunningly weak. There was one phase 1 trial that essentially just showed no one died or had severe immediate adverse effects. Then there was this tiny knee trial with about 12 people where the peptide was injected into arthritic knees and compared to saline. 7 out of the 12 said their knee felt a bit better. Guys, in the medical community, a 12-person trial is practically an anecdote. It completely lacks statistical significance. Now, there are a couple of registered trials for oral BPC-157 aimed at inflammatory bowel disease, which makes total sense given its natural role in the stomach. But those aren't finished, and no data is even reported yet. If our bodies are so smart and this compound naturally heals tendons, wouldn't our bodies already be rushing it there? But no human tissue sample has ever proven BPC-157 naturally travels to an injured shoulder. All right, Section 4, Regulations and Black Markets. If there is zero proof this works in humans, how are everyday people getting vials of it? Well, let's look at the regulatory reality, because it is stark. BPC-157 is not approved for human use by the FDA. It's not approved by Health Canada. And if you are an athlete, listen closely to this. It is entirely banned by the World Anti-Doping Agency, WADA. If you get caught using it, you're disqualified, no questions asked. So how is it everywhere online? It's a sneaky loophole. Companies just slap a label on the vial that says for research purposes only, and suddenly they bypass massive amounts of safety and quality control. But selling it for clinical use in humans, that is 100% illegal. And I think this quote from our source material brilliantly captures the hypocrisy in the wellness space right now. This is for all the people that say, oh, big pharma, big pharma. This is big black market. When you have an unregulated space, you just have people making money. It's a marketer's absolute dream. You can claim whatever miracle cure you want online because legally, you don't have to prove a single word of it. Let's look at Section 5, Hidden Dangers and Risks. This is where we drop the hammer, transitioning from legal risks to the terrifying medical risks of these shortcuts. Because this is an unregulated black market. Nobody is verifying what is actually in the vial you just bought off the internet. You have no idea what the true dosage is. It could easily be contaminated with heavy metals. It could be completely unsterile. And remember, people are acting as their own pharmacists here, injecting this unverified liquid right into their shoulders or their knees. That carries a massive immediate risk for a rip-roaring infection, an abscess, or serious tissue damage right at the injection site. But let's say you get incredibly lucky, okay? You get a pure sterile vial. So the crucial point is this. Remember when we talked about angiogenesis? How BPC-57 theoretically promotes rapid tissue regeneration and blood vessel growth? Well, do you know what else requires incredibly fast, out-of-control tissue and blood vessel growth to survive? Cancer, carcinogenesis. Tumors literally need new blood vessels to feed themselves and grow. If you introduce a biological agent that facilitates out-of-control growth, you absolutely have to worry about cancer years down the line. And we have zero long-term data on this. The medical experts in our source refer to pointing this out not as fear-mongering, but as smart-mongering, empowering you with the biological reality so you can make an informed choice. Now, you might be thinking, but my buddy at the gym says it completely cured his shoulder, right? Well, that is where the placebo effect comes in. 30%. The baseline placebo effect in medicine is about 30%. If you inject literally nothing, just saline water into someone, there's a 30% chance they will genuinely tell you it reduced their pain. Pain is highly subjective. And in the hype-driven echo chamber of social media where people really want to believe they found a secret weapon, that placebo effect is probably closer to 50%. People are paying premium prices for a black market placebo. Finally, Section 6, Proven Healing Alternatives. What do you do if you toss the unproven vials? The reality is, there's no free lunch in biology. You have to pay your taxes, which means you have to do the heavy lifting of recovery. Start by consulting a real healthcare provider. Lean into proven methods like physiotherapy. If you want advanced, localized tissue healing, look into platelet-rich plasma, or PRP. PRP actually has growing clinical evidence because it uses your body's own concentrated platelets, drawn safely in a clinic to accelerate healing. No mystery lab chemicals required. Stick to the stuff that is proven, because right now, there is simply no biological cheat code you can order online. Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. The risk-to-benefit ratio of injectable BPC-157 heavily tips toward risk. You are completely in charge of your own health, and you hold the absolute power over what you inject into your body. So take a step back and ask yourself, when it comes to hacking your health, is the ultimate price tag, potential severe infections, black market scams, and long-term cellular mutations really worth an unproven shortcut? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Stay focused, stay curious, and I'll catch you next time.